Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie. I'm a book-loving, notebook-hoarding reader and writer on a mission to change lives one book and one notebook at a time. And this is the Get Literate podcast. On this podcast, we explore the power of leading literate lives. We talk all things books and reading, notebooks and writing, and everything in between to make our lives better. And no matter what better means to you, the pages inside books and notebooks can help us get there. So, each week, we'll mix together books, notebooks, mindful practices, and creativity to cultivate a life we love. Now, grab a notebook and your TBR list, and let's get literate. Allison, welcome to the Get Literate podcast today. I'm so excited to sit down and talk reading challenges with you today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Wonderful. Well, I have been a fan of your blog, Mind Joggle, for a little while now. But in case listeners don't know you or your blog yet, why don't you jump in first with a quick introduction and tell us all the things?
Yeah. Excuse me. I blog at mindjoggle.com. There's a lot there. I have a lot of kind of the standard book lists, themed book lists. I have some resources for reading challenges, which I know we're going to talk a little bit about today. My approach on the site is I try to take a little bit more thoughtful approach to reading. I like to dive kind of deep into books in different ways, rather than just sort of, plowing through a long list of books and jumping from one to another. So I think that's what makes my blog and my approach just a little bit different. I read the same as anybody else at times too. I will, just pick up a book and put it down again and move on to the next. But there are certain books that, I think really capture attention, and there's a lot to mine from them. So that's really the kind of reading that I enjoy and that I'm trying to share with people there.
Yeah. Now, you said a word that made me smile. You said, I have some book lists. You have a lot of content on your site. I want readers to be really clear that this is a rabbit hole that a reader will fall down very happily. There's book lists, there's things for book clubs and challenges and YouTube videos and so much more. So I just wanted to plug that a little bit more because I know readers, once they go there, they're going to find something that they can really settle in on. It's a beautiful site. I absolutely love it.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah. The YouTube thing is new. I'm experimenting with that this year, and it's way out of my comfort zone, but I'm having fun with it, learning a lot there too.
Oh, it doesn't look like it's out of your comfort zone at all.
Oh, well, thank you.
So as we mentioned, we are here today to talk about reading challenges. Now, I have had a love-hate relationship with reading challenges over the years. And because we're a podcast, people can't see you. We're just nodding your head as well. I am not a fan of reading challenges that are about the number, right? So many of the challenges out there are how many books can we read? What is our Goodreads number that we're trying to get to? And while I think that's helpful, it helps us build a reading habit. It helps us bring reading into our lives. I don't think it's very meaningful if we're really looking for reading to change our lives. And that's where we share a lot of the same philosophy. I think the same of reading challenges like, the alphabet challenge, where you read a book that starts with each letter of the alphabet, or the color challenge, where it's certain books of certain colors. I think they can be fun. I think they can spark a little bit of reading whimsy. But I personally, and I know you do too, I really value those challenges that are meaningful, that are personal, that are actually going to enrich our reading lives so that our actual lives can be better, which is my whole philosophy here on the podcast. And if you've listened to previous episodes, listeners, you know that I have my own challenge, which I'm just very basically calling 23 and 23, modeled after Gretchen Rubin, where it is my goal to get to 23 different bookstore or library hosted author events. I want to get closer to the book world. I want to see how it works on the inside. And so so far, I've gotten to see Julia Cameron talk about Write for Life. I've gotten to see Dana White talk about her new organizing book, Organizing for the Rest of Us. And I just got to see Kate Messner and Grace Lynn reveal their most beautiful picture book called Once Upon a Book. And so for me, I've been going into the challenge really picky of who are the people, who are the books that I want to read, because I have a specific purpose for making my life better as a result. So far, I'm loving it. I'm still a sucker for how many books I'm reading. Don't worry, I'm still tracking that. But I really love that more personal view. So when I saw your YouTube video talking about how you were looking at reading differently in 2023, I knew we had a chat, because you're talking about focusing on how you're reading versus what you're reading as well. And I would love for you to just tell listeners what your reading challenge is about this year.
Yeah. First of all, I love that. I love that you're trying to get closer to the book world. And I think in a lot of ways I'm doing that as well. Trying to find a way in deeper than just reading the book straight through again. So I have the same kind of history with my feelings about reading challenges. My first couple of years of blogging, I actually kind of rejected them altogether. I had read somewhere that tracking leisure activities makes them less enjoyable, like there's studies behind this. So, when the Goodreads prompt would pop up to track the number of books you're reading, like that doesn't appeal to me at all. At the same time, there was kind of this tension of, readers wanted this kind of thing, readers on my blog. So I do have, some of those resources, templates for people who want to, follow some of those tracking challenges and put together their little challenges. But the resources I have are much more geared toward people creating a challenge that works for them. Like if they want to read about a certain country or a certain topic, they can put one together with those resources. So I think that helps my discomfort with reading challenges a little bit. But this year, I started thinking a little bit differently about it, mostly for myself. And I started reflecting on kind of my lifelong love of reading and what that meant for me, even as a kid, and kind of what it brought into my life. And I kind of wanted to return to that and think about how I was reading. So I kind of landed on sort of what I've classified as like 4 quadrants of my reading that I want to pay attention to as I read. So I've got a video about this, but I basically have, I want to look into like the author's path of a book, how they wrote a book, what was their inspiration, what things changed along the way. I always find it really interesting to, read interviews and hear from authors about their whole journey of writing a book, because it's a story in itself. And then I think about the second quadrant that I think about is called the reader's path, which is very personal to every reader. What did or didn't resonate, what makes a book work for me, and what I want to, whether I want to seek out something similar in the future, or if it's something I need to avoid for some reason. Just sort of interrogating like my own reaction to any book that I read. The third thing that I like to think about is just sort of the facts. And this is kind of me being attuned to the little things that I learn when reading. And that was one of the things that actually struck me when I thought back to my childhood reading. It's just how much I learned about the world from even the silliest books, Judy Blume, The Babysitter's Club, like those books brought so much into my world that just taught me about the world around me, from, these characters that I loved following, just having their fun time with friends and stuff. And there is so much to learn from the books that we read. And I think it's just being attuned to those things. And if we have to, writing them down and looking into them more. And it just brings a richness to our understanding of the world. So again, that's kind of the facts. And then the fourth thing I like to learn about is what I think of as the life of the book in the world. So there's like a book, there's a world inside the book that's created by the story, but a lot of books sort of have a life of their own in the world. Whether that is awards that they've won or that they've gone on to be adapted into television shows or movies, things like that, or if they've kind of sparked some conversation, criticism, or there's, people kind of hit on something that's really problematic about the book that
Mhm.
they feel like other people should be aware of. And I think that is really interesting to learn about as well. So again, it's me just sort of taking more time with books, and it's not every single book, but ones that really sort of strike some kind of chord with me those are the ones I'll sit down with, and just to spend a little bit more time learning about, or kind of, again, kind of interrogating myself about. So that's kind of my challenge for the year, is to read just more thoughtfully like that.
Which is why we were destined to meet and talk about this today, because our philosophies are so aligned. We want to grow from our reading. We want to
Yes.
get whatever we can out of our reading life to enrich our actual life. And as you were talking, about the books and how much we learn from them, I don't know if I'd be the same person today if I didn't read The Babysitter's Club and Judy Blume and Sweet Valley High and whatever other books I could get my hands on as a kid. You're right. Every book has the potential to change us, but only if we let it, only if we think about it, only if we sit with it for a bit, rather than just whipping right through it just to get on to the next new release, right?
Right. And that's, I think, what is the great thing about this way of reading. Like, it doesn't have to feel like homework. Like, I don't have to pick up the most dense book about the history of some war or historical event, and tell myself that I'm going to learn about it. I can pick up, a silly rom-com with a character who has a very specific problem, and that teaches me something. I can look further into that, or I can just choose to simply learn about that from that character and that story. I think story is just such a powerful thing. That story is what makes it stick with me and enriches my life and my understanding.
Yeah. Now, if you're not an educator, you might not know this book. If you are in an education world, you likely do. But there is someone named John Shue, who used to be the Scholastic Library Ambassador. And he has a professional book for teachers that I think every human reader should read, called The Gift of Story. Have you heard of it?
I think I've heard of that. The name sounds familiar. Yes. Yeah.
You would love it. It talks about the ways that stories can impact our lives and how they touch our hearts and our spirits and our minds and all of the things. So I'm instantly thinking of that book as you're talking, because that is the power that books can give us. And having a challenge like this just help us focus on it. Because as you mentioned, what we pay attention to grows. And so a challenge helps us pay attention to our reading life, but we want to do it in a way that really works for us. So I'm curious, I have a question for you. Do you focus per book and think, okay, what's the author's path? What might be my reader's path? What are the facts? What are the life of a book? Or do you tend to say, okay, with this book, maybe you zero in on the facts and you leave the other three behind. But then on a different book that's maybe more striking about the life of the book, because it is an adaptation, do you go there? Do you have a particular way of approaching the challenge with the books that you read like that?
I don't think I have a set process for it. And some of them, I think I spend more time with than others. If something in particular resonated with me, I do like to, I often just start with Google and see if anything comes up in interviews. If the author said something in particular that really strikes a chord with me, I might follow that path further. Sometimes it's just, if there's some particular thing in the book that I want to learn more about, I might just note it down and then I'll start down that path. So it may have nothing to do with the actual book, but it's more just like the fact thing. So it really just sort of depends what hits me.
Yeah. So do you read with a book journal or a notebook or sticky notes or darts? Do you have something to kind of keep track of all of this that as it comes up, or are you an in the head kind of reader?
I kind of do. So I've tried a number of things over the years, and I have issues with paper. I hate paper clutter. So what's been working best for me lately is digital journaling on an iPad. So I do have a reading journal on my iPad, and I'll write things down. And that I find that is a good place to kind of keep a lot of my notes and thoughts about books. So that seems to be working best for me. Sometimes, I'm scattered in how I journal. Unfortunately, I'm not very organized about it. But so sometimes it will just depend on what I happen to be doing. If I'm taking notes while reading, it will tend to be in my iPad if I have it close by. If I am Googling something, it tends to be like I'm typing about things that I find or learn. So it's a little bit everywhere.
And that's okay, right? There's no one right way to journal, no one right way to notebook. But I will warn you, you are talking to someone who loves paper clutter.
I love notebooks, but I'm more about keeping them, like it's hard for me to write in a beautiful notebook. So I have to have
Yes.
something I can scribble with and deface almost.
Yes. That is an issue for so many of us. And I got to talk to Terry Brown on this podcast, who is the author of, well, a couple of books, but Sunflowers Beneath the Snow, and her most recent one is An Enemy Like Me. And we were having a conversation about writing and notebooks. And then I got to interview Deborah Glanz, who is this paper crafter. And both of them had this really great philosophy of, why wait? Right? I know it's beautiful. I know those pages are gleaming, but you can't get to the next beautiful one until you just use this first beautiful one. And it's really changed me, because I, like you, I'd have a stack of beautiful ones that I was saving. Even though I had 10 other ones I was using, I was still saving it. So don't save, go right in.
Yes, I love that. I need to do more of that.
So tell us about a book. Is there a book that you've read lately that's really sparked this kind of more intentional thinking on those 4 quadrants for you?
Yeah, I have really been into Rebecca Mackay's latest book. I have some questions for you. And so if you haven't heard of this, or if your listeners haven't heard of this, this is about a woman in her 40s who is a podcaster, and she's a film professor. And she's actually returned to her the boarding school she attended in high school. And what happened when she was a student is that her former roommate was murdered on campus. So she's back on campus to teach this podcasting class, and some of her students are looking into the murder of this girl. Now, there was a man convicted of the killing. It was a Black athletic trainer on campus. And as they start to look into it more, she kind of starts to doubt that this man is in fact guilty. And I just love how Rebecca Mackay writes. The Great Believers was her previous book, and that is one of my favorite books ever. She just has this way of thinking about things and of bringing past and present stories together with that bring this interesting juxtaposition of different viewpoints. And she does this again in this latest book, and she covers just a whole bunch of things. There is gosh, I have some notes here. Misogyny and violence against women, our obsession with true crime, and sort of both the value and the harm of that, which is a really interesting thread. And she just writes beautiful prose on top of that. So I actually listened to this book, and which was wonderful. One of my favorite audiobook narrators, Julia Whalen, narrated it. So it was wonderful, but it's such a complex book that I feel like I could read it again in print and still get more out of it. So I just loved it, and I hope that other people will read it as well. Yeah.
Well, that is a new book for me, and a new author. Honestly, I haven't read her books yet, so this is a fun introduction. I'm taking notes.
She's amazing. Yeah. So one of the series that I tried to start on my blog a couple years ago that I'm hoping to resurrect this year with kind of this new reading challenge is I called it The Story of the Story, where I did this sort of deep dive and in kind of a listicle format, so people could pull out just little interesting tidbits of the things that I learned about a book. And I really only did it with a couple of books, but one of them was The Great Believers, where I went back into some of the writing process and the things that she learned, and just some interesting facts from the book. So I'm hoping to do more of that.
Yeah, that does sound wonderful. So you're basically taking your 4 quadrants and just making that thinking visible for us readers of
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
blog. Oh, I would love that. Not only to see where your thinking is, but just to get an idea, because we've been readers forever, and we all tend to have a groove, right? We like certain genres. We like to read in certain chairs. We have a certain beverage in our hand. We have a certain way of thinking about books. But reading someone else's process to know how they just attack a book, how they jump into a book, how they enjoy it, how they learn from it, that fascinates me. I love, like you, I love author backstories, and I love seeing how in any book club session, right, we can all walk away with a completely different idea or enjoyment factor or understanding of the book because of how we approached it. So the story of the story, that sounds fascinating. I'm going to have to dig into more of those on your site. I do hope you bring them back and keep them going this year.
Yeah, yeah, I'm working on it. And a lot of it is things I pull out from like author interviews, and I try to make it just a little bit more easily digestible than these long interviews, which are really interesting, but a lot of people never really get to that point of reading a long interview with an author. So I hope, I try to cite all my sources to give those people credit, of course, for their writing and their interviews, but just to kind of give people a way into that type of reading and just learning a little bit more about a book.
Yeah. So what other books might be on your TBR for your new challenge?
Yeah, I was just looking at this weekend of what's coming up. So I have one called Community Board by Tara Conklin, and she is an author who wrote a book called The Last Romantics, which is a kind of a big family drama that I really enjoyed a couple years ago. And this is a really different book. It's about a woman who returns to her hometown kind of after her life goes south, and she's kind of having trouble connecting to people there after being away for so long. So she starts kind of responding to anonymous posts online and trying to connect with the community in that way, which I'm really interested to see how this goes, because I actually tend to find some of the local boards, just some of the most vile places on the internet for whatever reason. I don't know why that is. They just, people get stuck on the minutia of the things going on in their neighborhood and just become really awful to one another. So I'm really interested to see where she takes this story.
That is a new one for me too. But already you definitely are on the reader's path. You're already
Yeah.
invested in that particular book. Um,
Yeah.
I've
And
oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh,
Give me.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I had another one that I wanted to share because it may be of interest to other people who kind of grew up in the 80s and 90s. Susanna Hoffs, who is the lead singer of the Bangles, has a book out, her first novel. So it's called This Bird Has Flown. And I think it's supposed to be kind of a rom-com, but it kind of brings the music industry into it. So I loved the Bangles when I was a kid, and I'm just really interested to see if she can also deliver as an author. So
Oh,
just another one that's on my list.
that will be a fun one. Now I'm like, oh, well, what about Tiffany and Debbie Gibson? And I could
Right? Yeah.
have a lot of fun with some books like that. See, that's the fun part about books. It brings up things, it brings up emotions, it brings back memories with just the mention of a
Yes.
title or an author. I love it. Now I'm reading, as I mentioned, I got to be on a Zoom call with Julia Cameron, the author of The Artist's Way. She just came out with Write for Life. So that one is on my TBR. I can't wait to dig into that. It's my hope that I would read the book first and then go to the author event that I am kind of scheduled to for my challenge. But so far that hasn't happened. It's actually been the opposite, where I've seen them first, which has given me a renewed spark to read the book, to purchase the book, to have it arrive. So that's something I'm going to be thinking about as well of how do I use the challenge to spark my reading life, but then also extend on what I'm hoping to get out of it. So now my brain is really spinning, Allison, with, okay, how can I think about the author's path, the reader's path, the facts, the life of the book? I really love the life of the book. That really appeals to me. So my brain is kind of busy right now as I'm trying to think about the virtual events I know are on the horizon and how I might get more out of them by thinking about the way you're approaching the how, which is really exciting. And as I mentioned, it just fits how we both seem to feel about reading. We're here to grow. And, I noticed your blog has a tagline that I love. It's read, grow, thrive. And my tagline is read, write, learn, love. So it is just so fitting to see how those connect together. Can you tell readers how you named your blog? Because I loved that little tidbit.
Yeah, it's actually named after a quote from an Emily Dickinson letter, actually. I don't remember who she was writing to, but she was basically telling somebody that her father buys me many books, but begs me not to read them because he fears they joggle the mind. And I just sort of loved this idea. Obviously I don't know the full story behind this, but I feel like her father in doing this. He's sort of acknowledging the value of books and that she should have them, but he's also sort of like acknowledging the societal pressure that women shouldn't read this stuff. Women shouldn't be too smart, but he's subverting it anyway and giving her all the books so that she can read. And I just kind of loved that that picture in my head. So that's why it's called Mind Joggle.
I love that. So tell listeners where they can find you. They can go to your website, but how about your YouTube channel, social channels? Where can they find you to learn more about your challenge and join you and all the things that you share?
Yeah, I'm most present on my website, of course, mindjoggle.com. I'm also on other social media under the username Mind Joggle. I'm not very active on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook or any of those places. I am trying to be a little bit more active this year, so we'll see if I'm successful at that. Right now, my focus is YouTube, so I would love it if people would follow me there and give me feedback on what they'd like to see.
Is that Mind Joggle as well?
Yes, that's Mind Joggle as well. Yep.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and share with everyone what your reading challenge looks like. I'm hoping that we'll stay connected because I can see lots of connections in the way we read. Hopefully some of the books we read. I now have a list of books that I'm going to go out for my own TBR. And hopefully we can stay connected and just see how your YouTube channel develops, and hopefully my listeners, my readers will come find you.
Yes, I hope so too. This is so fun. Thank you again for having me.
No problem. Thanks so much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Get Literate podcast. You'll find links to all the books, resources, and ideas mentioned in the show notes and at alitlife.com. And if you want more, you might like to join my Patreon community. There, you'll find additional inspiration for your reading and writing lives, like bonus podcast episodes, book calendars, monthly book clubs, notebooking challenges, live events, giveaways, and much more. It's only $5 a month, and you get instant access to all the previous content too. You can learn more at getliterate.co. But one more thing. If you love what you listened to today, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, or take a screenshot of the episode and text it to a friend. This helps the podcast grow and builds our bookish and no bookish community too. Thanks so much for listening.